Greetings, my friends. This is Celeria Rosenkreuz, and on this episode of the Chronological Quran, episode 22, we once more embark on our study of Surah al-Fatihah. Surah the first, but also the fifth, which defines much of the Islamic ethos. I've prepared a little bit of an analysis, as I said I would, and this shall elucidate a bit of what was covered on the last video before we press on to look at Ibn Kathir's treatment of Surah 1, verse 1. So, first off we have this, wherein is stated that the surah is used to begin prayers. Later we have multiple hadith which are used to not only corroborate this use, but also to insist that this is absolutely necessary, or else the prayer is invalid. As someone who knows Islam outside of the scope of the Chronological Quran project, it strikes me that this is indeed very much relevant to the general spirit of Islam. By stating Allah has never revealed in the Torah or the Injil anything similar to al-Quran, the Islamic community has justification to regard Christian and Jewish practice in general as invalid, for none of their prayers can reach Allah's ears if they are all invalidated, and the mother of the Quran is absolutely necessary for a prayer's success. Islam has numerous other means of attempting to invalidate these Abrahamic religions, despite its claim that it is the legitimate successor of them. However, I will not be able to properly approach them here, I should think, as a result of still being bound to the general principles of my chronological work, despite allowing myself to dip into the tafsir to a much higher degree than I usually would this time. Now this brings us to the matter of the surah being called al-Quran in general. The tafsir attempts to justify this by saying, because the Quran starts with it, and because the prayer is started by reciting it, or because it contains the meaning of the entire Quran, or because the Arabs call every comprehensive matter that contains several specific areas an Clearly, there is some degree of uncertainty in what is actually the reason, if therefore different ones are being presented as possibly correct. I would submit to you that there is in fact an additional reason that this tafsir keeps out. Namely, the phrase al-Kitab is used in the Quran itself with great ambiguity as to what is actually being referenced, and it is only in the hadith that this is actually clarified as synonymous with al-Fatihah. Yet there is no clarity on the why of this matter. Thus the Islamic scholars have to speculate. I will not actually quote the passages where this phrase is used, in order to maintain the above-mentioned practice of only treating directly with the Quran passages which I have encountered in this series thus far. But for the sake of transparency and the ease of my viewers and readers, they are 43:4 and 13:39. Though it is possible there are also additional cases of which I do not know. It is worth noting that the phrase 7 repeatedly recited verses would have a similar problem, if not for the fact that Surah Fatihah comes so early in the history of the Quran, and Allah proceeds to brag about having given these verses over and over throughout the Quran from that point on, in a similar way to how the practitioners of Islam repeat the recitation of these verses every time they pray. Even so, despite this evidence, as the tafsir exemplifies here, we also clearly see that this is still a matter that Islamic scholarship thought it worthy of studying and affirming for generations to come, as if they had some sort of doubt over the authenticity of the connection. Very curious, I must say, given Islam's obsession with the aesthetics of clarity and truth. Now, moving on to the section that reads the virtues of al-Fatihah, we see a very interesting trend in the cited encounters wherein Muhammad reported Surah al-Fatihah to be the greatest surah in the Quran. Behold. There are 3 different individuals said to have had very similar encounters with Muhammad, though precisely what is said leading up to the instruction on the greatness of Surah al-Fatihah varies between these reports, as does the precise location in which the initial encounter that spurs the lesson happens to occur. Now, one could argue that all of these encounters happened and Muhammad was simply trying to hammer the lesson into the skulls of his followers, so that the collective of them all learned it. However, given how similar all of these stories are, it strikes me that it seems more likely that either one of these or none of them are actually correct, and that the name which has been included in the precise nature of these scenarios was changed in at least some of these versions in order to properly suit the interests of the speaker, or whoever caused them to memorize the hadith. Cynical, I know, but such is the nature of hadith in general. They're so detached from the original context of what the saying might have been, and come in such vast numbers that it is often very difficult to analyze precisely what the truth is behind the story. Well, you can at least take the moral of the story to heart, which each of these are trying to convey. Allah cares more about you listening to Muhammad than about you properly completing your prayers. What benefit you will receive from praying to him, and what praise and glorification Allah receives by you repeating Surah al-Fatihah over and over again, are apparently of less importance than immediately following Muhammad's leadership, wherever you receive it. Presumably, that would generalize to it being okay in general to shirk certain religious norms and responsibilities if it is necessary in order to pursue the more active marching orders of Islam. One cannot always head to the Friday service at the masjid if one is in the middle of pursuing jihad or something like that. I don't know, though. The limits of precisely how far you could take such principles are not entirely clear to me. Moving on, we are confronted by the suggestion that Surah al-Fatihah can be used as a magic spell to defeat poison and similar ailments. I don't know that this really needs to be explored much further, but it does corroborate the claim presented in the introduction that it is also called the cure. That's fine. I think it's also the case that Surah 2 is supposed to be able to exorcise jinn, though No, wait, I checked. It's actually Surah 113 and 114, which are called the two protectors. So it's just something associated with a few prayers that are directly included in the Quran. Weird, but again, not really something worth dwelling on. I guess it was two surahs rather than Surah 2 which tripped me up there. Lastly, there is the curious matter of Jibreel being stated to not actually be the angel that delivered Surah al-Fatihah, and that angel stating that you will not read a letter of them, yet you will gain their benefit. Which is very strange insofar as it makes it seem like Muhammad was instructed either to not recite al-Fatihah in the last 3 verses of al-Baqarah, the former of which he obviously did and did obsessively, or that they would somehow be disseminated without his speech. It is an incredibly strange hadith which I cannot make heads or tails of. It does not cohere well with the Islamic tradition in general, as far as I can tell. The rest of the matters we covered in the introduction video seem pretty straightforward and don't require much interpretation. All that is left to be said is that reading Allah's supposed elaboration of the way the reciting of al-Fatihah in prayer relates to him leaves a foul taste in the mouth. It makes him seem like he's saying, "Hey, gotta butter me up a little before I think of granting you what you're asking. In the part of your prayer that's actually not absolutely required of you in order to make it valid. Come on, you know you want to." That sort of narcissistic sentiment does not sound like it comes from a God that deserves worship. Having read forward in the following section, it feels as if it is quite necessary to take this next section and make it a video of its own. I think that it might be the case that this will drag our Surah 1 series to 5 videos, but honestly, when I'm looking at it, I think that the message that can be related by looking at this and reading it out loud is enough to actually properly warrant a video for itself. So I'm stopping here. And so I say, until next my words greet your ears, farewell.